Update: my ex-husband just admitted he still loves me, and I have no idea what to do about it. Original post: this is so surreal. I'm living a fantasy. I've had 1,000,001 times, and I don't even know if I want it anymore. This is a long story that no one will read, and I don't blame you, but typing it out might help me understand how I'm feeling here. We got married young, 19 and 22, with basically a shotgun wedding. Carried for 8 months just for it to end in a stillbirth. And he was there for me, and he cared, and it was like we fell in love after we got married. And things were good. He wasn't controlling, he believed in me, motivated me to do more and more. Go to school, get a degree, become a nurse, all that. He even paid for a good chunk of it himself, like most of it when he wasn't even making good money yet. The bedroom took some time to really figure out, but once it was mastered, it was mastered. He never tried to get me to have a kid again either. He was perfect. And he grew into being perfect, which just made me love him more. What we had felt so loving and good. And like, wow, I really just stumbled my way into this from a casual FWB to an amazing life and husband. And it stayed that good for a long time. Then I hit 30, and things started to change. It was little things, little comments he'd make about how young we were when we met, how we went straight into making our marriage work and school and apprenticeships, how we never really got to be young, even though I think 30 is pretty damn young. And he started to go out with his friends more, but not like before. Before they would come over and play video games or barbecue or something and chill out. But then he started going out. And he just started having more fun without me, I guess. And then it got worse. He sat me down and brought up the topic of an open marriage, more freedom for exploration and everything he couldn't do before me, basically. And I said no. He said he wasn't sure he wanted to continue with what we had, and it all crumbled from there. He just decided he didn't want to be married anymore. To be clear, he divorced me. He didn't cheat on me, but it was motivated by the fact that he wanted to. His words. It was a bad divorce, but honestly, only emotionally. I felt blindsided and horrible and begged for him to stay, even said I would do the open marriage after all, which he declined. He said it wouldn't be real if I didn't want it. And thank God he did that because it was true. But he was a good person through the whole thing. He just was. He gave me our house that I paid a fraction for because he wanted to make it up to me for him wasting my youth or something. Youth became such a big talking point, man, I don't know. He offered alimony, which I should have taken him up on, but I didn't because I felt bad. I didn't actually need it. But the point is, he divorced me, blamed me for nothing, and was kind. I couldn't even hate him. He wanted to stay friends. I didn't because I was still in love with him. So we landed on friendly terms. No blocking. Follow each other on social media. No bad words to either side of the family. But we don't talk. Except the twice yearly Happy Thanksgiving, Merry Christmas texts. The divorce was final in January of 2019. And I thought that was that. I didn't date through 2019 and 2020, and I couldn't for obvious reasons. Same for 2021, just focusing on freaking dying. I did meet someone in 2022, and we've been dating for almost 2 years in February. It's nice, easy, he's divorced too, neither of us want to get married again, and it just works. We were even talking about moving in together eventually. And then the ex calls, from his mom's phone no less. I had stayed close to her, not super, but like a phone call twice a month and sending actual gifts for the holidays. So I picked up with the usual, "Hi Judy, how are you?" And it was him. He hadn't talked in nearly 5 years, and then bam, there you go. Ex-husband suddenly is desperate to see me. He said that we really needed to talk and asked if he could come by. He could even bring his mom if I was uncomfortable with just him. And I said yes, but to bring his mom. Now at this point, full on, I thought one of them was dying. Mostly thought it was him and that he wanted to make amends or something, because nothing else would explain the suddenness. He came over to the house with his mom as promised, but he looked fine. They both did, which made me so much more confused. But I let them in and waited for him to say something. It was the most awkward 45 seconds of my life. until his mom elbowed him and said, "I'm not doing this for another year. Tell her. I'll be in the other room." Which I am crazy, or again, does that make it sound like he's dying? And she left for the kitchen and left us in the hall, and he just started word vomiting. I don't know what else to call it. Like, I'll type out what he said coherently, but I want to make it clear it did not come out this clean. Being young and dumb didn't matter when I wasn't with him. He thought he'd be happy to have a full freedom to do whatever he wanted, and he was for a while. He traveled, met people, dated, but it always felt wrong. And he knew he regretted the divorce years ago, but he didn't want to bother me after he broke everything apart. For effing nothing, apparently. He said his friends were in his ear, always talking about marriage and how it slowed them down, and he listened despite the fact that I never tried to stop him from doing what he wanted. And he still loved me, and he wanted me back, and he never really stopped. And he would talk about it year after year after year until his family and his mom told him what I told her about the idea of moving in with my boyfriend, and it triggered the hell out of him. And that's how he ended up at my doorstep. I felt like I was in a damn movie, except the music didn't swell and I didn't have like the magical moment of the love of my life and I was getting back together and all worked out. I just felt confused and angry, and I told him that this was all too much to drop on me out of nowhere and to leave. But I'd call him. So now I'm here, still confused, still angry, but now have to figure out how to tell my boyfriend about this. I will not be leaving him in the dark. But what the hell, man? If you love me so damn much, why did you leave? Why were you so insistent that you had to be with other people? You know I'm seeing someone. You could have tried this for the years that I was single, but why now? Why? I feel so suspicious and weird, and I don't know if I believe him. But at the same time, I still have never loved someone the way that I loved him. Is it that insane to think that what we had did matter to him? Is that delusional? Or did he just have a midlife crisis and regrets it? I don't effing know, I just don't. Now for the comments before reading the update. It sounds like he went looking for something and didn't find it. He invited you along for the journey in an unacceptable way to you, open relationship, and then decided to pursue it without you, divorce. I could see how he feels like other relationships do not stack up to the one that he had with you. One, the two of you formed an intense bond after marriage and a significant loss. And two, any relationship he had is not going to stack up to the 10 to 11 years of emotions and experience you two built up together. You two have been split up for 5 years, making him about 34. I'm curious how his friends are now, whether they're the same friends or not. Is he overwhelmingly socializing people in couples or with families? Is he seeing his social circle shrink as his friends pursue the life milestones he did far earlier? What is the importance he places on youth now? Is he willing to stick it out with a partner who will change and age as he is? How would you feel growing older next to him as he grows older? OP says, excuse me while I copy and paste these questions for the inevitable conversation. Thank you for taking the time to write them out. And then this person says, we don't share the same story, but my story sounds similar to yours. I was with someone for over 3 years in total. I thought this man was for me. He was the love of my life. We didn't have relationship troubles. If we did, he hid them from me. At one point after a year of dating, he broke up with me out of absolutely nowhere. It devastated me. I was confused and shocked. Fast forward 6 months, he comes back and basically says, it was a mistake. He was stupid. He didn't really want to break up. He still loved me and was waiting for the right time to come back, but was afraid. I didn't trust him, but I still loved him too, and I wanted to believe him, so I did. 2 more years together, seemingly too good to be true, and very happy, and bam. Once again, he broke up with me out of the blue. This time he said he didn't want kids, even though we had talked about kids and marriage since the beginning. He ghosted me the next day, and I had to find out a way to move on for the second time. This time worse than the last. It took me a long time to heal from what he did. If I could go back, I wouldn't have let him back into my life so easily. I don't regret having what we had, but still, fool me once, just be careful. And now for the update. Well, the height of the dramatics are over. I think it went as well as it could have, but I told my boyfriend everything that happened. He wasn't happy, but he wasn't mad at me or anything. I think it helped that X's mom had been there and we weren't just alone hanging out. But we talked a lot. Spoiler, we are not breaking up over this. And you know what? I love my boyfriend. And maybe it's just not as intense as what I would have had with my ex-husband, but that took years to get to. It wasn't overnight either. I think it also helped that my boyfriend is divorced too. And when I asked what he would do in my shoes, he had a lot to say. So we both agreed I'm going to see and talk to my ex about it. He said that if it was him, he'd want to tell his ex face to face that it was over. So I texted the ex, and to be clear, I wasn't vague about what was going to happen with him. The direct text, which my boyfriend saw, read, "Hey," his name, "obviously we need to talk about everything that happened the other day, but I want to be clear that we won't be getting back together no matter how the conversation goes. Knowing that, do you still want to see me?" And he did. So we set up a time and place public, and again, boyfriend is aware of all of this and is fine with it. But he did want to come with me. Not like inside where we were meeting, but drove me over and waited in the car. And I know that could sound weird or bad, but I feel like it makes sense. He's being so calm and collected about this whole thing. I think he just wants to stay in the loop. So not a red flag to me. Anyway, I went and we met up at a park, with boyfriend having direct eye line to the bench we were on. And we talked. It was a lot. Of course, it was a lot. I'd always have love for him, but the window to that life is closed years ago. He cried, apologized for crying, and it hurt a lot to see, and I felt so effing bad. I don't want to sound awful or like I don't take my relationship seriously, but for a second there I just wanted to kiss him and tell him everything would be okay. But I didn't because that would be dumb as hell. And it's time to move on. But the talk was hard. And I'm a little worried he's hanging on to some hope because it ended on a weird note. He asked if things would be different if I was single, which, obviously, I feel like he thought that question made some kind of point that I'm not seeing. I told him the truth that yeah, it would be. That my boyfriend was the top reason why I wasn't going to be exploring this. He asked what could happen if we ever broke up, and I said that wasn't really a healthy road to go down. But I swear that made him perk up a little. I don't know, maybe he took it wrong. Maybe I'm reading into it wrong. But I don't think I have to worry about him pining away for me, considering the circumstances of why we aren't together. I gave him a hug before leaving, and that was that. It's still over. Obviously, I told my boyfriend everything, even the weirdness at the end, which he didn't love. But he was fine with me keeping him unblocked, but did say he wanted to be told if he ever reached out again, which is completely fine by me. Like the code to my phone is open, he's welcome in any time. And I think that helped a lot. Like, I don't know, y'all. He was so damn mature about the whole thing. It was real eye-opening to how much I appreciate what we have. He's very different from my ex, more reserved and quiet, but sweet. And he can still communicate. He just chooses his words and actions very carefully. And that's the kind of thing that I need. Stability. I deserve that. I'm still a little worried about the ex though, considering everything I learned and how it ended. But I did my part. I'm not going to cut either of them off yet, because they really are good people. There is only so much I can write in a Reddit story, but I don't hate him for a reason, even though he emotionally effed me over bad. And especially his mom. She's a freaking angel. And I think after this, she won't bring it up again. And if he starts popping up or something from her end, then I'll do the hard work to cut her off. But that's it. It wasn't the big fairy tale ending I dreamt of, but the nice quiet life I made for myself is still intact. Story 2. How do I make my 25 female boyfriend 23 male comfortable being vulnerable around me? Plus update. Original post. I've been with my boyfriend for about 2.5 years now. Relationship has been great for the most part, except for his inability to talk about negative emotions. He's the sort of guy to just fob it off constantly. He mentioned before that he hasn't spoke about anything like this except for with his mother years ago. My friends have to my dismay, referred to him as a robot to me. I obviously shut them down straight away. I'm quiet, introverted myself, therefore struggle to make him feel like I'm a safe person for him to be vulnerable with. I don't know the right things to say. He has a real mental block on being able to talk about these negative things in his life. During arguments, he has described it as a ball in his throat whenever he tries to, and is simply unable to. I've never seen him cry. When I can see he is visibly down, I try and encourage him to share with me, but he just lies and says nothing is up. His family just found out that his mother has cancer, late discovery, and treatment isn't going to do anything. It came as a real shock to them, and I know it's affecting my boyfriend majorly. She was the only person he's ever been vulnerable with, and now soon she'll be gone. Then he'll have no one. I love this guy so much and want to be able to be there for him as he is for me. I was at work when they found out, and by the time I got home, he had already left to their house. I've spoken to him on the phone, and he sounded unbelievably rough. He's due to be coming back here tonight. I think now is really a make or break time to show him he can be vulnerable with me. I think if he goes through this bottling everything up alone, then he's never going to feel comfortable expressing himself like that. I'm really nervous about how to handle this, being introverted myself. Are there certain things that I should say, that I should do? What would you like your spouse to do if you were in this situation? I genuinely believe that once he's managed to speak once, he's going to find it much easier to do in the future. Now for the updates. Update 1. I've been with my boyfriend for 2.5 years now. He's never been comfortable talking about his emotions. The only person he's ever confided in was his mother when he was a child and teenager. Some people refer to him as a robot. Obviously, in the past, I'd expressed my desire for him to talk to me about things that are affecting him, but he just fobs it off. We've fought about it in the past, and he has said he just cannot get the words out. Earlier this week, his family found out that his mother will be passing very soon, as in potentially a couple of weeks even. It came to a surprise to all of them. I asked for advice on another sub earlier in the week, but about how I can make him feel comfortable being vulnerable around me. I'm rather introverted myself, so I was worried I would mess it up. Some kind people commented other types of intimacy I could try instead of words. One that stuck out to me was offering to wash his hair. I don't know why. Just feel like I'd love it if my partner offered to do it for me when I was feeling down. Well, he eventually came home. He looked rough as anything. I'd already made dinner, so we sat down to eat, but he pretty much ate in silence. He rarely even looked up from his food. I asked if he wanted to talk, and again he fobbed me off. Once we'd finished, I asked him if he'd like to shower with me. It would have been a couple of days at least since he had been able to have one. I dimmed the bathroom lights and put some relaxing music we both enjoy on the speaker. Got in the shower, nice and hot, gently helped him undress, and had him sit on the bench thing under the water while I finished undressing. I joined him on the bench and slowly washed him everywhere, taking breaks to rest my head on his or whisper something to him. I spent a while massaging his head as I washed his hair. I kept kissing him on the lips, forehead, neck, and occasionally embracing him. Rubbed his shoulders in places I thought he'd be aching for being up and about for 2 days. There was nothing sexual about the atmosphere. It was a whole different type of intense intimacy. It's difficult to describe. He'd hardly said a word during all of this, and he looked like he could cry any minute. I wasn't sure what to say. I didn't want to pressure him into anything, so I just looked him in the eyes, smiled, and said, "It's okay." Once we were done, we both sat there for a while on the bench under the water, not speaking, just enjoying each other's company. I kept running my hand up and down his back, across his cheek or head, just trying to make him relax as much as possible. Once I dried him and myself off, we got into bed and I stuck the TV on. I was half watching it and half playing with his hair. I asked if he wanted to talk about anything and he shook his head. I could tell he was really upset despite him trying to hide it. Maybe 20 minutes later, I could see him literally on the verge of tears. I rolled to my side and put my arms around him, pulling him into my chest. That's when he started. The tears began to flow, and he sobbed and sobbed. He was squeezing me so tight sometimes it wasn't easy to breathe. I could feel the years of bottled up emotions flowing out. He continued crying harder, and it broke my heart. He said something about his mom, but I couldn't hear as it was muffled. Seeing the guy that you love like that, clinging on to you as though you were going to leave while he let it all out, hurt my heart. I felt so bad for him. I had some tears myself. I just held him tight and kept whispering how much I loved him, that it was okay. I'm here, I've got you, etc. Even when he eventually stopped sobbing, he continued to have his arms around me so tightly with his face buried in either my stomach or chest. I continued just comforting him until he fell asleep. Usually I don't like cuddling when sleeping, but that night I held him all night long. I just couldn't bring myself to let him out of my grip. It's hard to explain the way that I was feeling during this. Obviously terrible that he was going through this, but at the same time, I was so happy and relieved. Is that weird? It was an emotional experience seeing the guy that you love more than anything show negative emotion on that level for the first time. I remember almost every detail of the night. It's etched in my memory. I haven't brought it up to him yet. I figured maybe it's best to let him talk about the evening when he feels ready. But then again, I also want to be able to tell him that it was okay and a good thing he did. I think he's a bit embarrassed that it happened, so don't know if he'll bring it up. I hope he does, though. I've read some women say that once they've seen their man cry, they lose attraction. It seems bizarre to me, if anything. I feel even more attracted to him than before. It's like it has amplified my love for this man. I never want to let him go. Thanks for listening to me. I'm sorry it's so long. I perhaps could have made it shorter, but I thought everything in here helps paint the best picture of the evening and therefore helps anyone in giving me accurate advice. I just needed to share it with at least one person, and there is no way I would speak to anyone we know about my boyfriend's vulnerability. Edit. Thanks for all the kind messages, guys. I wasn't expecting such a response. I've taken on board all the suggestions you so kindly made. I got some mixed messages when it came to talking to him about it. Some suggested a text or a note, which seems kind of in the middle, so I went for that option. I left a little note on his bedside table before I went out on Sunday. I outlined that I enjoyed our shower time and spending intimate time together like that. I said that I don't expect him to bring it up if he doesn't want, that I know how hard it is for him to speak about those things, but I'll be here for him if he ever does. If he decides that he wants to write something, I'll read it, that I love him more than he can ever imagine. I said that I'd like him to feel free to ask me if I can shower with him whenever he needs. A Redditor pointed out that calling the whole act an easier name to say may make him more inclined to let me know when he wants to do it again. I didn't expect any response from him on the topic, to be honest. Later that evening, though, he handed me a small note before going into the other room to play his game. I won't go into details as it was only for me to read, but one line stood out to me the most. I don't have the words to express my gratitude, but I think you know. Thank you for making me feel human for the first time in so many years. The whole thing was so sweet I cried a few happy tears. I'm dreading his mother's passing, but I'm hoping he'll let me be there for him, even if it's just a shoulder to cry on. Update 2. Sorry this will be very long, but it's not something I can discuss with anyone in my life, and just talking about tough experiences really helps me process them. Well, some of you may have seen my previous regarding my boyfriend's mom's illness and my attempt to comfort him, despite him being rather emotionally constipated all of his life. Despite our experience the previous night, he didn't really show any emotion or want to be comforted in the previous weeks. I suspect he may have been slightly embarrassed about that evening. While I reassured him about it, I didn't want to push the subject and make him regret doing it in the first place. Unfortunately, a few days ago, his poor mom passed away. I managed to see her a couple of days before, and my boyfriend saw her in the evening before. Once he found out, he shut himself in his office for hours. I tried knocking several times, but never got a response. I could hear him moving around in there, so I knew he was physically okay. Late in the afternoon, he eventually came out and sat down with me to watch TV. Neither of us said anything, but he looked rough as can be. I placed my hand on his knee and we both just sat there watching. I was kind of panicking because I couldn't think of anything to say that would make any difference to his pain. I got him to eat something and we just sat there. A couple hours later, he said he was going to take a shower. Originally, I just said all right, but then maybe 5 minutes later, I realized that he probably wanted me to shower with him again, but didn't feel comfortable asking. Kind of kicked myself for not thinking to offer him it earlier. Guess I was so caught up in thinking about what I should say that I completely forgot that I don't actually need to say anything, but can show it instead. I went and joined him, and it was a similar experience to the previous time. Once we got out, I again dried him off and I walked him and tucked him into bed. Now, this next part might be a tad controversial, but me and him both smoke cannabis occasionally. I normally will not allow any to be smoked in the house, as personally I think the smell it leaves is so unpleasant and grubby. On this occasion though, I figured it would help him sleep. So I got one of my pre-rolls. We both smoked it in bed while watching TV. He looked really upset and I was honestly surprised he hadn't cried so far. Some users previously mentioned that I asked if he was okay too much, so I made sure not to this time and didn't press it. I turned out the lights and we both tried to get some sleep. I could hear him sniffling a bit, so turned over and curled up against him in his arms. I didn't say anything, just laid there with him. I fell asleep pretty quickly, but my cat woke me up maybe an hour later and he was still awake. I moved up and swapped to being the one doing the holding. I rubbed his back and kissed his forehead. He just suddenly began crying. Not just the normal day-to-day tears you see from some people. These were heartbroken tears. I don't think I've ever witnessed anyone cry that hard in real life. It's a sound I never want to hear again. The pain he was feeling must have been insane. Again, he buried his face in my chest and just cried and cried. I could literally feel him shaking. We were lying there for hours. I had my arms around him and one leg over him. He was squeezing me so tightly the whole time. He could occasionally drift off, loosening his grip on me in the process before waking up, starting to cry again and almost grabbing at me, pulling himself into me again, as though he was afraid he'd wake up and I wouldn't be there. It was heartbreaking. Every time I just squeezed him back and whispered that I'm here or something similar. I'd kiss his head and rub his back until he drifted off again. He never stayed asleep for long enough. He properly fell asleep after maybe 3 or 4 hours of this drifting, and I stayed awake for maybe an hour past that just holding him. In the morning, I woke up first, and when he lay there for a moment before the tears started flowing again. We stayed in bed all morning just embracing each other. A user mentioned before that two people lying naked together being vulnerable is the ultimate intimacy, and honestly, now I couldn't agree more. I've never felt so close to someone. I was feeling so many emotions, it was intense. He cried in my arms several more times since, at random points of the day. While I'm obviously devastated for him, I can't help but be so grateful he's willing to allow me to be there for him. Crying in daylight out of bed is a huge step from only allowing himself to do it in a dark bedroom. I'm honestly honored that he trusts me so much. Hopefully he continues to allow me to be there for him in whatever capacity possible. Today I saw a TikTok video where a girl was mocking an ex for crying in front of her, and it enraged me. I cannot begin to imagine how these people think like this. To have someone willing to be as vulnerable as possible in front of you, to be comfortable asking for help in their darkest hour, and then turning around and effing mocking them for it. It's disgusting, and I'm so glad I am not one of these awful people. Anyway, that's it. Just reading it back, I can see how insanely long it is. I'm sorry. If you took the time to read, thank you. Don't need any advice, just helps me immensely to talk about this with someone. Update 3. A few weeks ago, I wrote about my emotionally constipated boyfriend's mother's death. After showing him through actions that he could trust me, he eventually allowed himself to be vulnerable in front of me and cried more than I've ever seen anyone cry before while I held him. It seemed after seeing nothing bad happened when he allowed himself to be like that, he's slowly becoming more comfortable. In the weeks following my previous post, he put on a stone face all day while he was working and doing chores, But then once we got into bed at night and I hugged him, he'd break down while hugging me so tight, and I held him and stroked his hair. He did it for almost 2 weeks. He cried more in this time than he had his entire life. Eventually, he was even comfortable actually talking about some stuff, which is a massive step. He told me how heartbroken he is about his mom's death. He talked about the pain he's in, his fears and worries. He spoke of now he was so afraid I'd view him differently, and that deep down he can't shake the feeling that I do. He even sounded scared when he said it. I started crying, I don't know why. Just something about it made me really sad that he'd have to go through his life with that mentality. It was heartbreaking. I just pulled him in for the biggest hug ever. Since he's opened up to me like that, I felt so unbelievably connected to him. Weirdly enough, it's almost as though he gave me a bit of his soul, something he had always been too afraid to give anyone else. I'll cherish it until the day that I die. It's also worth mentioning that the sex, my goodness, the sex. Feeling an emotional connection that strong makes it 100 times better. I've been having the best sex of my life. Being able to look into his eyes and see right into his soul is intense. Guys, talk to your significant other more. It's amplified my love for this boy so much. It's just such a shame that it took such a horrible experience to bring us to this point. That's all for today. If you're enjoying this story, please like the video and share your thoughts in the comments section down below. Thank you.